What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to episode 8 of the Chel podcast. Yes, we're on episode 8, and it's been a blast so far. We have the crew back in action today. Everyone's here again. And today we're going to be discussing the contract signings around the league. 3 pretty big names were recently signed within the last week. So we'll be talking about that, as well as doing our top 10 fantasy wingers, just like we did with the goalies and defense last week. We also put out a fan interaction question on our Insta page, which at the end of the podcast we will discuss as well. So Max, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you. Actually, I don't mean to be a burden about news, but we're actually going to discuss this right after the news about the mediocre goalie discussion. Not at the end, but stay tuned for the end when we will have a new fan question for you guys, and it'll be posted on Insta most likely day after this is posted. So I'm starting off with the news recap here. So we'll start off small here. I mean, Kirby Dach signing for 4 years, 4-year deal with Montreal, 3.3 mil. Not bad, pretty much a prove-it deal for him. Still very young, 21 years old, so looking to prove something there. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Not much, I guess. I think it'll be a good opportunity for him to play with a lot of younger players and try to figure himself out because it just wasn't working out in Chicago for him. So should be an exciting squad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he'll be able to have a brand new coach there with St. Louis, and a lot of the young players around him. So might be good for his development. Moving on here, since, that wasn't really the biggest news around here. Moving up the ladder, we got Tim Stützle signing for 8 years at 8.35 mil, starting next summer. Keep that in mind. A very big deal for a guy that really hasn't proved it just about yet, but they're definitely handing out yet another contract based off his potential. And I think a lot of us are on the same page in agreement that I would say he can live up to that, but again, we'll have to wait and see. So, I'll throw it over to any of you guys who want to chime in on this deal.
Yeah, I'll chime in. Again, another young player signing a big contract. I kind of look at it 2 ways. I don't think he's really deserved that contract, that term, and that amount. But on the other end, looking at Ottawa, they've now secured and locked up all their young pieces long term. They don't need to worry about contracts coming up and having to re-sign. Like, their core is basically locked in, and now they just have to focus on building them. But that is being said, that is if Stützle can hit value and perform under the contract. So a bit of a risk, but the outlook does look good. So that's my take.
Especially for the type of player that Stützle is very, very active in the offensive zone. I think he has really high potential to keep putting up big point seasons. Maybe not this upcoming season, but definitely for the rest of, or almost the entirety of the contract, barring injury or anything. I think it's going to be an exciting deal for Ottawa and an exciting deal for his teammates as well, to be able to play with a player like that.
Yeah, it's also, I think, good for Ottawa to get their actually young stars locked up, because that's definitely been a problem for them. Probably the last almost decade here is players not wanting to play there. So to have some potential stars locked up is a big deal.
Yep.
Yeah, that new ownership sure seems to be laying down the line that they're a little bit different of a team, and you didn't see a lot of their players locked up long term. Now they're starting to build their core and really get them locked in here.
Definitely a 180-degree swing from when Eugene Melnick was in charge.
Really?
Just trying to sell everyone off just to pinch pennies and everything, right?
For sure, yeah. Perfect. I think we can move on here to the one we're all definitely waiting for, at least us for Canuck fans here.
Yeah, I couldn't really care less.
Yeah, you'll have your opinion here, but J.T. Miller from really out of nowhere. I mean, we knew this contract, his extension talks have been going on for months now. If he was going to get traded, if he was going to get traded at the deadline, then to the draft. But he's here to stay. 7-year deal, $8 million a year, starting next summer, like next year. So he's basically a Canuck, really, for the rest of his career. I like this deal. I'll shoot it over to Aaron. Give your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, in my probably biased opinion as well, I definitely like it. Also, I do think in a few years it might not look as good, but again, you have to give that length of contract if you want a guy like that to stick around. So, I mean, it's really good just for general morale of Canuck fans. You know, having a guy like that in your team always makes you excited to watch.
Yes.
But also, his play will really be beneficial the next few years to building that team again.
Yeah, I mean, great points. I mean, as we all know from Cuckman, he's, as they would call it, a gamer. He does a lot for the team, plays on all strengths. Something that the Canucks do lack, in my opinion, too, is he's a tougher body, a tough guy to face. He hits a lot. He's kind of just all over the ice, and he really plays his heart out. I'll pass it over to anyone who wants to take over here. I know all of us will have an opinion on this matter.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I think it's double-sided with this one. I mean, obviously you're re-signing a great player. A lot of term though as well, coming through a player that's not, 29 years old. I think Canucks are in a spot where this is the best team they've had in a while. They've been bottom barrel and tanked for the last better part of the last decade. So they have to do what it takes to make their team the best as they possibly can in the next, I would say, 5 years. And that would for the next 5. What's that cost? Yeah, contract at $8 million. So that's the price. But they ponied up and they did it. And now it's up for the Canucks to perform. So, you can't rebuild forever, and you have to make your team competitive. So I think that's what they've done, and I'm not arguing with the decision. I like it, and Miller's an amazing player, so it keeps the fans happy as well. Kyle or Mike, what do you guys think?
It's all you, Mikey.
Yeah, good signing. I'm kind of surprised that he wasn't signed earlier, but I guess nobody else really kind of gave him what he wanted or even offered anything. I haven't really heard any rumors on that front, but I know he was saying that he likes the market in Vancouver and he likes playing with the team and he thinks he can win with this group. And like Corey said, it's probably the best team they've had in a while. From maybe not from like a defensive standpoint, but definitely from an offensive standpoint where they can actually score goals. The only thing is, with this being a long-term and a big deal is, well, we'll discuss this in future podcasts for sure, but just the question is, will Bo Horvat be able to re-sign with them? Because we all know he's going to want to make, a bunch of money, and he's going to want to stay long-term if he does re-sign.
Is it possible, though, to re-sign Horvat if they trade a couple of their middle six wingers?
I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, but I would say might be very difficult, but maybe the easiest candidate is next summer to trade away Myers. He'll only have a year left at that point. At $6 million, so that's covering $6 million of an extension money for Horvat, which would be really nice. That
would probably be the best move because teams don't really want to acquire anybody who has more than a year left on a contract right now, unless it's a star player.
Exactly, yeah. So 1 year left of Myers, that's pretty movable in my opinion. So that will definitely give a lot of money to Horvat now.
Yeah, it's some potential there. I don't necessarily agree with the signing from like an outsider's perspective, but I understand why the Canucks did it. It makes them a competitive team for the next 5 years, barring no big names moving or injuries and all that stuff. But
I don't even agree with.
what
Yeah, I
part?
was gonna ask that too.
What part I don't agree with?
Yeah.
I don't think it makes him a cup contender. I think it still keeps him in like the contending for a playoff spot kind of mode, and your goal as a team shouldn't be, especially when you have the pockets that the Canucks like deep pockets like the Canucks, your goal shouldn't be to be a playoff contender when everyone's in their prime or just passing their prime. Like you have to know when to pull the trigger and trade your more skilled players for prospects and start over and try to build a cup contender.
What should they do? What should they have done?
What they should have done is they should have traded Miller last trade deadline. They would have got a haul for him.
And then what? And then what? Because you can't just trade Miller. Are we trading everyone? All our assets?
I would stop signing bad contracts and I would start trading assets for anyone who's 24 and up, except for your goalie. Keep the goalie. Everyone else, try to trade them if they're above 24 or 25 years old, because they're not going to be there when that team's in its prime.
So you're not confident this core is a winning core?
I'm not confident. I haven't seen that at all. I saw 1 year where they had a pretty good year, and didn't they get to the second round of the playoffs one time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's all they've done is get to the second round of the playoffs one time, and they missed the playoffs a bunch of times. Although there's been other factors that have kind of come into it with like injuries to some key forwards and stuff, but like Besser's not a top line player on a Stanley Cup contending team. Petey, he's a good player, but I don't see him leading the Canucks to a Stanley Cup championship, and that's the ultimate goal in a sport like this, is winning the cup, not making the playoffs.
Now, there's no guarantee if you blow it up, if you rebuild, there's no guarantee that'll create a contender either.
It's no guarantee at all, but if you have the right management in place and they're not going to sign dumb contracts and do all this stuff, like there's a reason why Stevie Y in Tampa Bay, he blew it up and then he started from scratch and he was able to build a perennial Stanley Cup contender. Same with Joe Sakic in Colorado, where you just embrace the suck because it's going to make you a better team and be a good drafting team and a good developing team, not a good free agency signing team. And then you're seeing it all over again with what Stevie Y is doing in Detroit right now, where he just embraced the suck and they were terrible for a couple of years, and now they're starting to actually build a team that could make the playoffs next year, and the team's not even at its full potential either.
I think all the winning teams of the past few years, they have, almost all of them have a first overall. If you look at like McKinnon, Stamkos, Ovechkin, Crosby, Kane. And then you have another top five supporting them, like Hedman, Malkin, Taves.
Makar.
So all these teams have this elite talent, which they've had from tanking and drafting. And then, of course, shrewd GM that can acquire a build around the core. And then I would say about 10% you kind of have your St. Louis, your LAs that maybe they don't have that first overall. They have some high picks like Doughty, Kopitar. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Kyle. Max don't have that. My only thoughts are try and go for that 10%. Like, you can't rebuild forever. This is the best. You have a core that's all hitting their prime at the same time. You might as well go for it and be competitive, because there's 32 teams in the league, and if you have a slight chance, you might, and then retool from there. Like, having all the young players they have at one point right now is rare. You know, it's as rare as having McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen, maybe Byram all at the same time, Landeskog, and then, you know, can Miller be like a Ryan O'Reilly that puts them over the top? That's the hope. I think Miller can be better than Ryan O'Reilly, but will the team be? I don't know.
But it's also not like they're adding Miller in, they're just extending him, and he's just getting older. And I just had to look this up while you were talking there. Yeah. The first time Pittsburgh won a Stanley Cup, Crosby was 22. The first time Chicago won a Stanley Cup with Patrick Kane was when Kane was 21. So they were already becoming good teams when those guys were not even close to their prime, and that's why they had a couple cups in there. So I just think the Canucks core is a little bit too old if they're looking for Stanley Cup, but if the goal is to just make the playoffs and maybe go around, yeah.
Too old? Look at the team that just won. Aside from Makar, they've all been around. McKinnon's not 22.
That's fair. I mean,
and, Pittsburgh won 2 cups with Crosby and Malkin, not very young. So I think there's definitely a large range. I think your best players from 22 to 28, I would say, would be the together, and a good GM can build around them. I'm not disagreeing. I think that you can't win a cup if your pieces are overpriced. Like Myers, OEL, Pearson, like you can't be overpaying. Your stars need to hit value. They need to make a lot, but also back it up with great play. And then everyone else needs to either value or actually undervalue. Your depth needs to be undervalued. They need to be playing above what they're making. Really, you can't have, as you say, you can't have any bad contracts. So, I mean, yeah, they are not in the best setup.
I think that they're in a good spot to make the playoffs. So. Anyways, we should probably get moving along. That was quite the discussion.
You guys could debate that for an entire podcast easily.
Fans, that is what we got a glimpse of Kyle versus Corey.
You will be seeing it many times again.
Yeah. Don't worry, it gets better.
They'll just go back and forth forever.
Anyways, fan question from last week. Again, thank you for everyone that commented on our post and shared it with anybody that you know that might be interested as well. So we're going to talk about what you guys decided on the most mediocre goalie in the league and what we decided. So first off, we'll get to the fan vote in the comment section there. We had Binnington slight lead over Campbell as the most mediocre goalie in the league, and then Allen, Murray, and Talbot also got votes. Max, who's your most mediocre goalie in the league?
I'll actually probably pass it over to Mikey here because I know he shared one with who the fans voted for. And then
good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so before last week's podcast, we were all listing our goalies we thought who were mediocre, and I said Binnington. Sorry, Pratik, if you're listening, you're a St. Louis fan. But, I mean, I know he's won a Stanley Cup, I know that, but he got outshined, I should say, by Husso last season. He didn't even play up until maybe the last little bit of the season plus playoffs. Then he was doing a little bit better. Yeah.
Until he got run by his defenseman.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I've never seen him, do incredibly well. And I think my whole kind of, like, justification was just kind of, like, looking at last season as well, too. Just what happened, how a random backup goalie came in and just, stole the show. While he was supposed to be, like, their top goaltender, their kind of superstar goalie that will take him to another cup. So that's kind of my opinion. I don't think he's the worst. I just don't think he's the best. He's mediocre.
Yeah, that's what it is by definition, basically.
Yeah.
I'll start with mine here then. I have James Reimer. So he's been in the league for quite some time, and I mean, he's just always a goalie I see just playing roughly starter. Like roughly, he's always a starter, but never really enough to really notice him out there as much. For fantasy wise, he's always on some interesting teams, and he's had some decent seasons, but he's been very up and down. And just, I mean, for a guy who's been in the league since 2010, 2011, you don't really hear a lot about him. He's just kind of there, and he's now on San Jose, and they just traded away Hayden Hill, so he is obviously still starting there with Kakkonen. I don't have much else to say. I mean, I just see him there as just like a very mediocre goalie who plays around half the games and sometimes a little bit more, but that's about it. I'll pass it over to Aaron.
Sure. So my mediocre goalie was Matt Murray. And my main reason for this was probably more fantasy related. He's just one of those guys that's always sort of floating in the middle of the points, but never quite really up there. He's obviously been successful before, but I don't see that as him carrying the team. I don't think he's that kind of goalie at all. I think you put a good team around him, he's going to do well, but he just doesn't really shine that much in my opinion. Yeah, that's pretty much it on that I have.
For me, I had Elvis Merzlikins as my most mediocre goalie. For me, like the definition that came to my head was like somebody that you totally forget about until he kind of comes up in conversations like, oh yeah, he's he's all right, he can be good, he can be bad. You can forget about him for 3/4 of the season, then you'll have a 60 save shutout and go back to obscurity.
Yeah.
Corey, yours was a legendary pick. Let's hear your most mediocre goalie ever.
Corey, legend that came to mind was Chris Osgood. This guy just screams mediocre. Won a couple cups, at least one, I think. Yeah, I think he just cemented for mediocre. Little surprise pick.
What were some other ones that we discussed as well? We had Ty Conklin is a legendary pick. What were some other?
Ty Conklin. They're like backups that have just
Patrick
like
Lalime.
Yeah, just seems like, I don't know, you can't hate the like backups that just, they're always consistently meet, which I just, you gotta respect it.
Yeah.
Was there any other fan comments come through? I know we had Binnington quite a bit.
Yeah, Campbell was an interesting one. That came up a couple times. And, I mean, we all, I think, had him in our fantasy top 10. So I guess that just goes to show how a goalie can perhaps be carried by a team versus that not actually being that star goalie. Anyone of you have any thoughts about that? Why Campbell could be a really mediocre goalie?
I completely agree that a goalie can be carried by a team, especially like Toronto, Edmonton, where you just have to let in less goals than McDavid scores, so.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah. All right.
Should we hop into the fantasy winger rankings?
For sure. I think pretty much same as last week, so obviously I think we explained it back then, so it comes down to, for wingers, it's mostly about goals and assists, but hits and blocks do play a pretty key part in it, as well as special teams. So without further ado, Mikey, take us away.
Yeah, so at number 10, we had my boy from the New York Rangers who helped me in fantasy a lot last season, and I think that was the main reason he kind of went on our list. He had 52 goals on the Rangers. Chris Kreider, 52 goal scorer at his age right now too, was pretty unreal. I know just personally, we've talked about this like 18 different times on the podcast with the trade Max made. I'm so thankful for that.
You're welcome.
Just again, in any kind of fantasy pool where you're looking at points, you're looking at plus minus, you're looking at hits, he'll do it all for you. He's obviously very aggressive, as we've seen. He likes to hit. He'll put the puck in the net on the power play as well, which, you know, gives you an additional point there if you're playing in that point system. So I think number 10 was a great kind of seed for him. I will kind of say that there might be, you know, potential for other wingers in the league to kind of take his spot over, but just from his 52 goal season he had last season, I kind of think that's a good spot for him at the time being. What do you guys think? Chris Kreider at 10? Do we agree?
I didn't have him on my list at all. I don't trust that he'll do that again this year, but at the same time he's playing with all the same players, same coach, same everything, so he might have a hell of a season again.
I don't know if he's gonna have another 50 goal season, but like I said, in terms of like every other like stat aspect you can kind of grab, plus he'll get points. We know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at the direction the Rangers are going, I mean, they're only going to be the same, if not better. So, yes, he might not put up 52 goals, but he's still going to be on that top power play. He's still going to be on a really solid team. So, I mean, I think 10 is fair. I don't think having him any higher would make sense for now, but in a couple years, maybe he can be a little more consistent. I can definitely see him moving up that list.
Yeah, I'd also like to note that Aaron and I were the only ones to actually include him on our top 10 lists. We both had him at number 7. So, but because of the wingers just being so hard to protect and all of our lists being pretty sporadic, I would say, it did average out to him actually finishing 10th. So, all of you three did not have him at all.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like looking at it, I was like kind of focused on other wingers. That's why I said that potentially, you know, there's like Pasternak's and like those wingers that could be above him for sure, but just for kind of what we were going with and what the average went out with, we'll work with it.
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
Yeah, so number 9 is his teammate, Panarin. Everybody knows how good Panarin is. He's a danger on the ice every time he has a shift, power play, 5-on-5. He won the Calder. He plays well pretty much with like anybody he plays with. I'd say they build chemistry with him fast. When he went on to Chicago, he was easily like, he worked so well with Patrick Kane, kind of when they were on their run together, and he comes in here and with their top 6, he can pretty much play with anyone on that team, and he scores goals. So potentially he could have been higher again, but he made the top 10. So, I mean, this is a great fantasy pick for anyone kind of basing it off scoring, getting points for goals, assists, plus minus.
So I'm just going to go back to your comment about Panarin scoring goals there. We just mentioned Kreider on the same team with 52. Panarin had 22 goals this season. So that, to me, is pretty disappointing when you look at who he is.
But Panarin is better at like dictating play, whereas Kreider's just.
Yeah, so that's a good point. He did have 74 assists, so that boosts his points a lot. But in our league, he definitely fits lower down because he doesn't hit, he doesn't block, doesn't score goals apparently either.
I could have sworn Aaron was the biggest Panarin fan a couple years ago. What happened?
What happened was I picked him second this season, and he disappointed me all year.
Yeah, I would have loved to have Panarin, but when she took him, I was like, oh man. But then he didn't live up to that expectations, I would say, of being drafted that early.
I mean, it's just one season. Watch him pop off this season and get...
Oh, we very well could.
Yeah, he's very capable of that.
Oh, yeah.
I would take Panarin over Kreider. Kreider had a unusual career year at his age. There's no way he replicates, not even close to it. I'm going to guess he gets, how did he score 50 goals? I'm going to guess he gets half that this year.
I agree with you, Corey.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kyle. What do you think Panarin's gonna get, Corey?
What do I think Panarin's gonna get in terms of goals or points or?
Yeah, goals.
You said 22 last year.
Yes.
The same between. I'll say 25 for both of them.
I bet 40.
For Panarin?
Yeah.
Holy. Okay.
That's a good take. I like that.
Whoa. Alrighty, I think we can probably move on here. Coming at number 8 in our rankings is Gabriel Landeskog, Cup winner, the Avs. Way to go, Kyle. This guy is, I would say, a beauty in our league. He plays on probably the best team in the NHL. Plays on one of the top lines most of the time. Plays on the top power play of one of the best teams. Hits, blocks. I mean, I had him last year and he's a gem. He had some injury issues, so that's always one thing to note. But man, is he a guy that you love to have on fantasy. And
in our format, he's sort of that perfect mix of we'll get you points no matter what.
Exactly, yes. The one odd time, though, he did have a few fights. It does hurt, but hey, when he has a few hat tricks here and there, it's pretty nice.
He's kind of a bonehead sometimes when it comes to the penalty minutes, but that only hurts us in fantasy. So.
Also, we've got to stop boosting Kyle's ego about Colorado winning the cup. His head's already inflated because of it.
It's fair.
It's not entirely true. My head's inflated all the time.
One thing I do want to ask, though, is Kyle, you didn't even have him on your list.
What?
Yeah, no, I'm honestly not the biggest Landeskog fan. Obviously, he's super helpful in game, in situations, especially, and like in the locker room and stuff too. So I like having him on my favorite team, but he just I don't know. I don't even know what it is about him that bothers me.
Okay. Okay.
I couldn't even tell you. I just won't ever put him on my list. If he's there when I'm drafting, then I'll take him. But I think my bias as well is not putting Avalanche players on my list unless it's super high, because if I put them on my list or no, because who do I got? Rantanen. And
I swear every time somebody picks up a Colorado player, you sigh because you wanted him.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's not a fact, because I wouldn't draft many Avalanche players, because if they have a bad season, then I hate them, and then I'd rather them have a bad season and it not affect me in like leagues as well. So I try to avoid Colorado players. If you look back, there's very few Avalanche players I've ever taken.
It's true.
I drafted McKinnon once, first overall, because I was super confident, and that didn't really turn out all that well that season. He did all right, but it wasn't a great pick. I've never taken Rantanen. I've never taken Makar. I've never taken Landeskog. I don't think I've ever even had one of their goalies either. So
interesting.
I just don't want to mix like my emotions too much, because my fantasy team puts me through the ringer, and so does the Avalanche, and I don't want them both affecting me.
That's pretty much the opposite of all of us, though. I think almost all of us here always take a Canuck, except for Aaron.
Yeah, I've never owned a Canuck.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Why is that?
I don't know, to be honest. I think partially it's because there's those few good ones that I would like, but you other biased Canuck fans draft them really high. So, yeah, I don't know.
Note to self.
And also, Aaron wins every year, so
I was gonna say.
Strategy.
I was gonna say, note to self: don't take Canucks players. Win the league.
Alrighty, we can move on to number 7 here, who almost all of us had him on our list except for myself, but he worked out to this spot anyways. Alex Ovechkin. I I mean, what can you say? He had one of his best years last year at his age. Continues to rack up those goals, which is crazy. I'm not voting against it. I'd love to see the guy keep going, but I just don't see that happening, especially considering the year before that, during that little shortened bubble year, he did not have a good season at all, and I'm taking that into account, and I don't think he'll be as good this year.
He had 42 points in 45 games.
Yeah, but only, I think it was 20. I had to double check how many goals, but he wasn't as
24.
good. Okay, yeah, I mean, it wasn't as a dominant a year. I remember it was just very, for him, pretty weak year, and I think he's going to be slowly hitting the decline here. So, and I
That's
don't
what they've
think
been
he's
saying for years, though.
I mean, yeah. You never
There's also nothing I want more than for him to break Gretzky's goal scoring record. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
I'd love
giving
to see that
him as
too.
much positive energy as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Mikey, Corey, you guys had him both at number 2. I mean, he can definitely finish number 2 or even number 1 based off what he does in fantasy. Yet again, we can mention he hits a lot, scores goals. That's great for our format.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's why I had him there.
I'm a big Ovechkin guy. I had him.
Me too.
I've had him several seasons, and I mean, yeah, he got 24 goals in 45 games, but like every time this guy touches the puck on a one-time or on a power play, it's going in the net.
Mm.
The only thing is, like, have they done enough this off season and the draft, and with their team to kind of build some more players around him? Because is Backstrom even going to return? I don't know if Backstrom's playing. They still kind of got their forward core, from what I know.
All right, let's
With
move on to
Strome
number
and
6 here. Sorry, Kyle, we're
Okay.
getting a little bit late.
That's
in the time
fair.
Here.
That's fair.
All right. So number 6, we had Matthew Tkachuk. So he's another one that did really well in our fantasy standings this year. I mean, he had a lot of points, a lot of hits, but him moving to Florida will probably hurt his standings next year, I would assume. So that, for me, is the reason why he moves farther down this list in this kind of position. Anybody else, any quick thoughts on that?
For me, it's the opposite. I thought Kachuk will be higher than Huberdeau because Huberdeau doesn't have the same people to play with, and Kachuk has now Barkov to play with. But
That's what I think. I had him at number 2, actually. I think he's going to be a great pairing with Barkov, and he'll be back on power play 1 over there. I can see it being more or less the same season for him. Maybe not, over 100 points, but it'll be pretty close to that, I would say.
It's hard when he had such good chemistry with his previous line mates, but when you're a skilled player like that, yeah, you never know. You could just gel that fast, and it could be, well, another repeat of this year. We'll see. All right, let's move right up to number 5. We had Marner coming in at number 5. I mean, again, he gets a lot of points. He's not quite as physical as some of our other people on this list here, but he does have the benefit of playing with one of the best goal scorers in the league, which definitely does boost his points a little bit here. Yeah, throw it over to you guys. Any thoughts on that one?
Marner's better than Huberdeau.
Well, we'll get into that in a minute here.
Yeah, so that's actually a good point to bring up here, is that in our standings, when we attributed there with our votes, we actually had a tie in 4th and 5th place between Marner and Huberdeau. And those of you that follow our Instagram would have seen our poll come out, and thank you for your feedback. That did help us decide these rankings. So let's move it on to Kyle to give us number 4.
Number 4, we had Huberdeau. He won our fan vote by a score of 14-9. So not the closest vote, but pretty close, I guess.
You might as well make it 13-9 because I accidentally voted as the Chel Stars account for Huberdeau.
So you're biased.
A little bit biased.
So it wasn't working. I couldn't see the results, so I thought for some reason if I voted, I'd be able to, but that was dumb of me. So you can blame me for that.
Unbelievable. Well, I also voted twice on both my Instagram accounts, so I guess you
Really
can call
trying
it
to get the
13
win
to
for
8.
Marner. Jeez.
I was, cause Marner's playing with Matthews, Huberto's playing with Kadri. I don't know. I just think Marner's gonna have a better season.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a very good regular season again for both of them. We'll have to see.
Yeah, the
We
funny
will
part about
find
these
out.
winger rankings is I have a feeling that almost none of our predictions are going to be right just because of how close they are.
Yeah, and how much variables go into it. Yeah. So heading to third on our list, we had Kaprasov, who is one of my favorite wingers in the league. I had him super high on my list, especially when you factor in that the guy's playing with Ryan Hartman and Matt Zuccarello, who Matt Zuccarello is doing awesome, but just not the same quality as who everyone else is surrounded by, but he's still putting up crazy points. So that's why I had him so high.
Yeah, I mean, him and Zuccarello made a great pairing, and Hartman definitely fleshed out that line, having a career season for him. It'll be interesting their team with losing Fiala and the big dead cap hit they have right now with Suter and Parise, so their team isn't as fleshed out as it might be, as they might want it to be as a contender. But Kaprasov, I would more or less expect over 100 points again for him. He's just that good.
Oh yeah, he's just continued to get better every season. He's just so valuable in our league and even just a points league. I mean, he's just surrounded by people that will help him score, but he's also just capable of carrying the team almost, it seems like.
And just a ton of young talent coming up into that team as well, between like Matthew Boldy, who had a great season last year, Marco Rossi. A lot of fun young players in Minnesota.
Yes. Speaking of talent, let's move up to number 2, where we have Mikko Rantanen from Colorado. So I had this guy number 1, coming from the best team, top winger on that team. I expect Colorado to still keep the performance up. I don't expect them to regress, at least not in the regular season at all. Aaron had him down at number 8. Aaron, why did you have Rantanen at number 8?
I have no clue. I really don't know. I'm looking at this list again, like, why?
You're starting to sound like me.
Yeah. I don't think he is number 1, but if I did redo this list, we'd probably land 4 or 5. For me, just like you said, being on that Colorado team makes him very valuable. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking.
Kind of injury prone though. He's always missing like 10 games a year, so he could cost you a couple weeks.
Right.
In fantasy.
And that leads us so smoothly into number 1, mentioning injuries. Go ahead, Corey.
Speaking of injury prone, we have number 1 winger Nikita Kucherov. So 4 out of 5 of us had him at number 1. I guess I'm the one that did not. I had him at number 3. On LTIR, he is top winger in this league for one of the top teams, Tampa Bay. He's going to get goals. I think I didn't have him at number 1 personally. Will start to regress and decline a little bit. And I think other players like Rantanen can number 2. So I don't know what. Pretty consensus that Nikita Kucherov, and I think that's deserving of the top spots. Mike, agree?
Yeah, he'll put up goals as long as he's healthy and their team stays healthy. He'll put up goals. I know he's had injury problems, but when he's actually playing, he gets tons of points especially with who he has on his like wings and his center and his defense, and he's on the top power play unit, which is one of the best ones in the league.
Yeah, enough said. Really.
Deadly.
I mean, 4 of us had him as our consensus number 1, so I think, as long as he can stay healthy, he'd be a great fantasy addition for your team, to say the least.
Yep.
So that pretty much concludes our top 10 list here. So we're going to quickly go through another a dark horse candidate for each of us, just like last week. And then we're basically going to have to cap off this episode due to us just kind of having a very constricted schedule this week. So I'll start us off. I have for my dark horse a guy who's just always talked about as primed to break out and be that guy. And in our fantasy, he definitely is a guy who hits and does a lot for the team, but has never taken that big step forward, I would say, and that is Andrei Svechnikov. I've had him a few seasons in fantasy, and he's always been just very mediocre. We talked about mediocre earlier, but I mean, he just doesn't live up to that high expectation. And, you know, for Dark Horse, I think he's always just going to be there for me, and unless he can really prove it this year, I think he's just always going to kind of be a guy who's always ready to do that, but we'll have to see if he ever actually does that. And Carolina looking to be a contender this year, so we'll have to wait and see. Aaron, how about you go ahead with yours?
All right, so my dark horse, I chose this one mainly because of a lot of the moving pieces around this team, and that is Tyler Toffoli. So this is an interesting one. I mean, he's never been that high up in our leagues, but I can see with him playing with a couple new line mates, potentially Huberdeau, Kadri, maybe just some better chemistry for him would probably just make him a little more valuable. I don't see him being anywhere near to a top 10 player, but definitely a good deeper pick that I could see being valuable this year if he matches well with his new line mates there. Let's move on to Corey.
Yeah, I'm going to go with maybe not so much dark horse, but a player that we haven't talked about is Patrick Kane. I mean, he used to be the best winger in the league for so many years. Obviously, the team is not that great right now with Chicago, but I think we can anticipate he's going to get moved to a contender and hopefully put up a lot of points that way. So don't sleep on Patrick Kane. Also, shout out Evander Kane as well, which is another great pick. On Edmonton, he's going to put up a ton of points. Just double down and go both Canes are my dark horse.
I like it.
Yeah, that might actually be a sneaky pickup. Like if you have a pretty strong team, just hold Patrick Kane and then he goes off in fantasy playoffs at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's interesting to see when or if. I'm assuming he does get traded, but we'll have to see when that actually does happen.
Or where that is too.
That too. All right, Kyle, why don't you give us yours?
Yeah, for sure. So you were talking about somebody who is poised to break out and never does. I'm going to talk about somebody who has broken out and is still not talked about enough. My dark horse pick is Jason Robertson out of Dallas. Crazy season last year. I think he scored, close to 40 goals? And he was just the offensive driver of that team along with Pavelski, and I don't think anything's going to change this year either.
It was just over 40.
Love it. I think I picked him up on waivers in one of my leagues. I don't know what league it was.
All right, Mikey, why don't you cap us off?
I get it. Kaprizov. Good one. My dark horse is Jake Gensel. He could have easily kind of, in my opinion, been on that top 10 list. Last season, he had 84 points in 76 games with 40 goals. So he's no slouch, and he's actually produced pretty well throughout his career in the NHL, and he plays with Crosby. So, I mean, a healthy Crosby, healthy Gensel, I mean, you're getting that's like points. Also want to do a little shout out to Pasternak. Not to forget about him, because he's still a top player and a top winger for sure. I just don't know why we didn't have him on our list, but he's definitely up there.
He's just in a very tough position with Boston this year for sure. That kind of hurts him, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd agree. Alrighty, I think that's pretty much comes down here. So I've got another question for you guys here. On our Insta page, we will be posting another question for you, and that is going to be leading up to our next week's topic, where we cover the top 10 centers. So our question for you is, who is your dark horse centerman? That can be someone that you think is outside the top 10 and will break through, or even just similar to Aaron's pick with the winger, someone that will just be like the biggest riser throughout the year. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to comment multiple times if you want, even. We don't care.
Unless it's the same name multiple times, then that's not productive.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny.
All right, so I think that about wraps us up for this week. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Like Max sort of alluded, next week will be our final fantasy rankings with our centermen. We will also probably be getting into some more season predictions at that point too, so make sure to stay tuned for that. And for more fan questions, as always, check out our Instagram at ChelStars. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a review. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week.